Welcome to Friday, the Juneteenth. I welcome everybody to tonight's session. I don't know whether I belong in a Ren Fair or the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, but I hear they're pretty much the same thing, so it doesn't matter. I know, politics are so hard right now. So here's the thing. I've been running down the list of my columns, going back and back and back and back and back, and they just seem to be falling in their own patterns. Literally, these were like one right after the other. Hi, Isaiah. So, we've been talking a whole lot about the police. And in Norfolk, the police are now suddenly embroiled, because they've been rocking and doing it just right up till now. And then I guess the Virginian pilot asked for some records about their shootings and violent incidents, and somebody has refused. Hey, Joanne. So it just seems fitting that the two that just happened to come up in the rotation tonight both involve Norfolk police officers. You may remember at least one of these. I know anybody who's in Larchmont or anywhere near Larchmont is going to remember this one. The title of this, and they're both from the Virginian pilot, is Gray Matter Wins in Larchmont. It's from July 30th, 2016. We want our police department to be the one that chooses restraint over force whenever possible. Yet during a 3-day siege in my Norfolk neighborhood, after an armed elderly veteran barricaded himself in his home, we learned that the preservation of life can be frustrating, time-consuming, and expensive. From what I've now witnessed, genuine tolerance takes more time and a whole lot more money than I thought. In this case, it took SWAT teams from my city and 2 others, plus round-the-clock patrols, a bomb squad, a robot, dogs, and multiple negotiating teams. In this heat, it also took about a truckload of Gatorade. Yet, before we all dive into the ensuing debates about the budget, inequality of services, and response in policing, I want to pause to celebrate the preservation of life in this and every instance. Let's take a moment to be unified in the agreement that this is the kind of preservation we want everywhere for everyone. I believe we help facilitate that by first giving officers the support they deserve when they choose life. For those who missed it, here's what happened. My neighbor, Larry Worcester, a Vietnam veteran with a long history of bizarre behavior, snapped. Larry apparently took an axe to a vehicle in front of his home, according to witnesses I talked to on the scene. When an officer arrived for the vandalism call, Larry brandished a gun and then barricaded himself in his home. The standoff remained at a status quo for nearly 3 days until he was taken into custody without further incident at 3:30 a.m. that Thursday. On Wednesday, while my neighbor Penny was out in the 100-degree heat offering popsicles to police clad in body armor, I went to run my chess program at Lambert's Point. Chess players besieged me with questions. "How come he didn't get shot right away?" asked a 10-year-old boy. Local Reverend Curtis Lee, who lives in Old Huntersville, where his neighbor had been armed and barricaded, added, "Well, in my neighborhood, police would have cut the power, shot tear gas, no matter how old the man was or if he was a veteran." For the record, by day 3, many of my neighbors were talking about forcing Larry out. But it's not okay to tear gas the mentally ill or leave them to suffer by turning off their power in triple-digit heat. Which just goes to show that if doing the right thing were easy, everybody'd be doing it. I really want to thank the man who started all the restraint, the officer who was the first one on the scene, While facing a gun, he made a split-second decision. He chose life for Larry. I believe that if the same officer responds anywhere, given similar circumstances, the result would be the same because he's a life chooser. One bullet could have ended the standoff in Larchmont quickly. Yet that officer, followed by the entire police department, demonstrated that one bullet carried too high a cost. That is what the birth of restraint looks like. Name it hope, nurture it, teach it to walk through the city as it grows up among us. And yes, Curtis Lee had the right thought in his head. He knows because he's seen what happens in his neighborhood on Church Street if somebody brandishes a gun. That was 2016. And yes, Larry was white. So we can have a lot of debates on this one. Keep off the tracks, November 6th, 2016. Last week, I witnessed a Norfolk police detective on his knees at midnight on the light rail tracks of the Tide, cradling in his arms a man who set himself down there as a declaration that life's burdens had become too heavy. It was just as Tuesday became Wednesday. I was on my way downtown to pick up my husband from work. I was stopped at a red light on Brambleton and Colley Avenues beside the Tide station when a man came walking across the intersection with his shoes in his hands. He walked as if every inch was a mile of hot sand. He stopped in the middle of the road, apparently talking to God as he looked skyward. Now, just please take me now. A car behind me pulled around the rapidly unspooling thread of life. The light turned green. I was trying to dial 911, fumbling with the phone. My hands were shaking because all I could see was my brother standing there. Adam died a year ago this month, homeless, bipolar, and drunk in a New York City subway station stairwell. Please, the man said loudly. The light changed and I stayed put. The man slumped like a marionette whose strings had been cut, and he fell to his knees. Then he crawled on all fours until he reached the tracks where he laid down, and he was not getting up. Adam sought the subway train station to die, with 3 times the legal limit of alcohol in his system. And here was a man on the tracks. Driving on was not an option. I finally managed to dial 911 while careening around the block to put my Jeep between the prone man and the tracks and anything coming. The operator asked, is he intoxicated? Who knew? Do sober people make these kinds of life choices? Maybe. The operator told me not to approach him, and then an ambulance was being dispatched. But by the time I got around to position the Jeep, another man was standing over him. I jumped, thinking he was an attacker, but instead he was a plainclothes detective. The detective was compassionate beyond my expectations. He kept trying to lift the man off the tracks, but he was like a rag doll. I lost my job, the man groaned. I lost everything. Just leave me. Nobody can help me. Did Adam say the same things? Backup arrived. I could see the ambulance lights approaching. There was nothing more for me to do but leave and pick up my husband. My regret today is that I didn't walk over and tell the stranger that I cared about him living or dying. We can't help someone who doesn't accept the assistance, but we can let them know that they still have a place here. Maybe he'll read this. Maybe his story will help somebody else when the tracks or the pills or some other inviting release is looking like a place to lay it all down. Don't. Please, don't. Take it from me. You still belong here. I know this because I've looked at those tracks myself more often than I'd care to admit. Every time a bill is due, the car conks out for good. A child needs something I can't provide. I just wish it would all go away. When it doesn't, I think that maybe I'm the one who has to go, but I'd be wrong. I know because people tell me so, and I have come to believe them. Yet here I am. Every day that I spend off the tracks is a good day, and there are more of those days every day. So Get on the tide. Look around and see the possibilities where today you see only the failures. Trains and tracks and you were made for moving forward. For the record on that story, the man who lay down on the tracks to die was black, and every police officer on the scene was white, unlike the reverse situation of the first story. I will never be heard making any kind of excuse for the brutality, the inhumanity, the racism, the white supremacy that pervades so many law enforcement agencies in our country. I also believe that we need to remember that there are good people who take care of us, who take care of each other. We need to move forward and we need to find solutions. Maybe that means scrapping a whole system. But when we scrap the whole system, when we take out those bad apples, we need to remember to keep the good ones and encourage other people to join and be like them. There are some people who are leading by example. I hope we start finding more of them. Please take care of yourself. Stay off the tracks because you matter. You matter to me. You matter to somebody else too. There are people all around you that you matter to. So think about this. I did later get a letter, not from the man on the tracks, but from another man who was in jail in Portsmouth. And he wrote me a letter just a few days after that, thanking me for the column, because he said that being incarcerated, he had been planning to take his life. And when he read this story in the Virginian Pilot, he decided to wait. And it turned out that just a few days later, he actually got an early release that he didn't even know was coming. So I never got to write back to him because by the time the letter got to the jail, he was already out and released, living his life. So if you're watching, I hope you're having a blessed day. Happy Juneteenth to everyone. Please follow some of the Girl Trek Black History Boot Camp videos that I've been making and that we've all been putting out, because there's so much we didn't learn and so much opportunity for us to start learning more right now. It's not too late. It's not. I know I sound like a Pollyanna. I mean, we've already covered white privilege and what it means, and we've covered a lot of things, but you know what? Can't say it enough. Can't say it enough. Even though I've had a life full of no other privilege, like I didn't have money growing up, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, it doesn't mean I didn't have white privilege. It didn't mean that that first man in that first story didn't have it, because he sure as heck did, because he didn't get shot on the spot. Because we have lots of doubts about that first story and what would have happened if he hadn't been white. But we hope and pray that the officer that spared him is one of the good ones for everyone. And I'm just going to hold that good thought. We're going to find those good people, and we're going to get rid of the bad guys together. I love you. Like I said, happy Juneteenth. Keep it real till tomorrow.